Criminal Record Episode 3, Kid in the Park, raises the stakes for our main characters as Daniel strives to keep things under control and June can't seem to help but dig herself into a deeper and deeper hole. We've also got a new movie poster reveal in June's dining room, which we'll talk more about later in the video. So let's dig in and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episode breakdowns. The episode opens with a rather disturbing scene in Roundtree Park where we see a young boy take a bullet to the head during a gang-related drive-by attack, followed by scenes of doctors rushing to save his life and Daniel arriving on scene to investigate. June is seen making an unwise decision, printing flyers on her work printers, asking people for information regarding the unknown Hayes Lane caller. June overhears her boss Roy telling the office about the details of the Roundtree Park incident and that DCI Hegarty is leading the investigation, which definitely raises suspicions for June. Back at the crime scene, Daniel tells Kim that they are able to save the boy, but that the bullet is still lodged in his brain. He says he told the surgeon they must have the bullet so they can begin searching for the firearm. Kim gives Daniel paperwork for him to approve officers to work on the case, and after pausing on Linker, ultimately approves her. Kim introduces himself to June and Chloe and says there are gangs that run deep in the area and that nobody's going to talk to police. We cut to Daniel inside a car wash making phone calls using an insanely cryptic looking card. I stared at this thing for like a solid 2 minutes and I can't make heads or tails of what I'm looking at here, but definitely something mysterious about this thing. And he makes a few calls about favors and putting feelers out, but ultimately we don't know who he's speaking with here. My assumption is that the numbers on this card are for criminals that he's made connections with out in the community so that he can reach out to them and get information in situations like this. Leo and June visit her mother and it's mostly just chit chat about the shooting and the young boy, but we did see a new movie poster that we haven't seen up to this point, and this time it's Dr. Strangelove. It's brilliant that this poster was just revealed in this episode because while Dr. Strangelove is about Cold War dynamics, it could indicate an incorporation of political or social commentary, which is why I believe they included it in this episode, because we saw a young, innocent boy fall victim to gun violence. If you can't tell, I'm sort of geeking out over these movie posters, and I'm just wondering if we're gonna get more in future episodes. I really hope we do. Next, June pays Sonia a visit and informs her of everything going on with the new case and that she's now working alongside Hegarty. While June is there, Sonia shares that she's roped in some of Doris's volunteers to help with Errol's case and that she's asked them to help pass around the flyers June was printing earlier in the episode. Sonia then hands a box of evidence from Errol's case to June, who's hesitant to take it because of her boss's orders to stay away from Errol, but ends up taking it home and digging into everything in her basement anyway. We quickly cut to Daniel visiting Tony, who says he's got something for Daniel in the spare room, but he's not gonna like it. Daniel goes in and finds the flyers June and Sonia have been having passed around town, and he also sees something on Tony's laptop, but closes it before we can see for ourselves. Back in June's basement, she calls Sonia and says things aren't looking good for Errol due to his own criminal record. Sonia tries to brush it all off, and June moves on, saying there's no real motive or evidence other than the blood and Errol leaving with Patrick. Sonia points out that Errol was heading to his mom's when he got in the accident, then offers to set up a meeting between June and him and that she can do it without anyone knowing. Before June could answer, though, she receives a call from Hegarty saying the boy from the park is still not being operated on and that his mother has asked June to come by. She heads down and meets with the mother, who requested her because June's ex-wife said June could be trusted. I'm not entirely sure what the point of this scene was. There wasn't really any new information given to us. It was just a meeting. It may have been actually for what happened after this conversation. Outside the hospital, Daniel asks what that was about, and June says she's a friend of a friend. The two discuss the details of the surgery, but Daniel's phone rings and he has to step out to take the call. When he does, June finds his business card for his luxury driving service and takes it with her. She heads to White Cross Prison and says she's there to visit someone named Samson Michaels, and as she enters the waiting room, she spots Sonia, who ends up visiting with Michael, and June heads in to meet with Errol. Daniel meets with an unnamed man and asks him if he's able to help with the kid at the park, then hands him an envelope full of cash. My assumption is that this is some kind of PI or fixer or something that Daniel's having to pay and use out of desperation. Back at White Cross Prison, June meets with Errol and he connects the dots that she's police and that nobody else knows she's there, so he invites her to ask any questions she may have. June asks him about his original alibi, and Errol confirms that he had spoken with a man named Mustafa at a barber shop, but that the man had disappeared. June asks him if he stands by this alibi, and he says he does. So then June asks why he ended up confessing, and he said he was just on so many drugs that he honestly can't be sure. He said he had good days and bad days, and all that matters is that she's gone. June says, well, what about your mom? What about Patrick? Which gets his attention, but then he ends the conversation once June tells him she hasn't seen or heard from Patrick. After June leaves, one of the guards calls Tony to inform him that June had been there to visit Errol. June asks Sonia why she wanted Errol to meet with her, and Sonia says it's because she needed June to see that he was done trying and that it's on them and Doris to figure things out. June shares Daniel's business card with Sonia and says it's not super unheard of for a cop to have a night gig and that maybe he just needs the money. And this is going to come into play later in my theories at the end of the video. June is called down to the station where Kim tells her a snitch has given them a name for a shooter, Jason Reeve, and that they're headed to his address now. June stands by as the SWAT team moves in and finds that only Jason's girlfriend is in his apartment. Daniel takes a quick call from Tony, who informs him of June's visit to Whitecross and says she's on a warpath and that she's not going to stop and needs to be dealt with. After the call, Hegarty sees Jason approaching June from behind with his gun drawn and doesn't alert June that he's coming. Jed, the officer working in the van with Hegarty, observes this happening, so Daniel finally alerts June to take cover just as Reeve opens fire on her. Hegarty is told the subject has been detained, but they can't find the firearm, so the team begins sweeping tunnels that he was running through for the gun. While there, Daniel mentions that they missed June at the briefing, and she begins to lie about a court case, but then confesses that she was at Whitecross to conduct a prison interview in hopes of finding information about the park shooting. She says she didn't want to tell him because she thought if she mentioned Whitecross, he would assume she was there to meet with Errol. Daniel pulls Jed aside and asks him what happened with the visuals during the raid of Reeve's apartment. He goes on to say, "I know, she could have got hurt, but she's okay, so no harm done, eh?" He then appears to threaten Jed by writing up his mistakes in order to keep Jed quiet about what happened with June. Next, Daniel's working on a press release, and when asked who should deliver the news to the press, he says it should be him since he's the lead. Then everyone's asked to leave the room, and Daniel's told someone else should be used, so they land on June so they can better mirror the community. Before she goes into the press conference, June receives a call from another cop, Mick Hargraves, who's calling her back after she had reached out about the arrest for possession of drugs of a 14-year-old boy. Mick says he does remember that day, and 7 people were charged, but not Patrick because of an intervention. A detective from another precinct came by and said he could vouch for Patrick and had him released without charges. So yeah, we can see there at the end that Hegarty was involved in keeping Patrick off the streets, but the real question is, why was he doing that? One of the theories swirling around in my head is that Hegarty does know Patrick's real father and that he's some type of powerful criminal who has a hold on Daniel in some way. In fact, Patrick's father may be the one who really killed Adelaide, Patrick's mom, but for whatever reason, Daniel owes this guy and covered up the crime and is now protecting Patrick. Now let's talk about June. She somewhat hilariously keeps teetering between the "no, I'm not gonna look into the Errol situation because my boss told me not to," and doing insanely risky things to get caught, like going and talking to him at Whitecross prison. Ultimately, I think her inability to restrain herself from looking into this is going to bite her in the end. I mean, look at this episode, she literally almost died because of what she's been doing. And speaking of that, I think it only magnifies just how serious Hegarty is about covering up whatever it is he's covering up. Something so serious that he's willing to have a fellow officer murdered. You know, now that I think about it, I've got another theory. We've got Hegarty working 2 jobs, visiting some type of underground gambling club, and then this subtle comment from June in this episode saying, well, maybe he just needs the money. This could all come down to Daniel being majorly underwater in gambling debt and owing the wrong people, and because he's unable to pay them back, he's having to cover up crimes for them. I'm feeling like based off everything we've seen up to this point, that's making the most sense. So let me know what you think of my theories and drop your comments down below on what you thought of this episode and any theories you might have. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.